goes on. The beat goes on.
Back in the Mike Chambers, our radio program, and it is my pleasure to welcome to our program Thomas Sheridan. He's an artist, writer, musician, lives in Ireland, and has just published his first major book, Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. It deals with psychopathic behavior in society, both at the macro level and in everyday social interactions. Their traits and how to recognize the pathology and then recover from the manipulation. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Hello, Mike. Thank you very much for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on. This book, for those, if you've not read it, it reads really quickly. And I think you've written it in a way that you can sit down with it and really in just a few hours, have it poured through and get a real understanding of what's going on. I think you did an excellent job with the book. But as we get started here, let's define what a psychopath is. What exactly is a psychopath? I know in the minds of people that, first thing that comes to my mind, is the Bates Motel.
Yeah, the first thing that comes into a person's mind is always the axe killer, but that's actually a very misleading image that's been put out there. The psychopath, the actual term psychopath, has been around since the late Victorian era, but it was brought into popular usage by Harvey Cleckley in his 1947. He wrote a very good book on the subject. The pathology is basically, if you strip it down to its most basic thing, it is a person who has unrestrained impulses with a lack of responsibility for the actions. So to demystify that, somebody who just doesn't give a hoot about another human being and will do whatever they can do to get that. So the vast majority of psychopaths are just the people we meet in our lives who seem to have no cares in the world, are totally self-absorbed, although they can pretend they're the most caring and charismatic people, and they will do anything to get what they want, and they will have absolutely no remorse, compassion, or even understanding of why they should have empathy for the people that they've manipulated and used. So basically, someone just said to me last week, and I thought it was a good one, they're basically just users. And yes, they are users. Now, they can be anything from a user who just basically, manipulates you to get what they want. It could anything from a sexual relationship or to, living with you for a while. They need a place to crash, right up to destroying your life just for the hell of it, and indeed destroying entire countries or the entire world, as many of them are driven towards that because they're ultimately driven by power and the need to control at the macro level and at the micro level too. So basically that's what a psychopath is. A person who just will do anything to get what they want and to control people and will have no remorse in how they achieve it.
Now, is there a difference between a psychopath and a sociopath?
No, it's two different names for the same thing. What happened was when Alfred Hitchcock made the movie Psycho in the early 60s, Norman Bates really wasn't a psychopath. He was more of a schizophrenic. In order to deal with the confusion there, they came up with the term sociopath, which just means basically a socialized psychopath, but it's exactly the same thing. There's no difference. It's an interchangeable term.
A socialized psychopath.
And that's what most of them are.
Yeah.
Most of them are.
Because, and that's what we derive as a psychopath, but using your definition of the psychopath, these people can basically be anywhere in a society unless you know how to pick them out and you know the signs. You would never know it unless you're involved with one.
Oh, indeed. And often if you're involved with them, you don't know it until, whether it's your boss or workmate or some politician you put your faith in or you're married to this person, you won't know it until something extraordinary happens and they have to either make a run for it or they've decided to move on, an upgrade to the next, they're always looking for someone to upgrade to or something to.
Yeah, and as you were going through.
Sorry.
You cut out for just a second. Go ahead.
No, I have a chapter in my book called The Equal Opportunity Predator, and that's exactly what they are. You'll get them from the shanty towns in the worst parts of, Nairobi, all the way up to, the palatial mansions and everywhere in between. They're absolutely entrenched in every aspect of humanity, and they're at all social stratas. They're in every ethnic group, race, religion. They're everywhere. And if there's one in every 25 people in the Western society is one. So if you know 25 people in your life, chances are you've encountered a psychopath.
Do you believe that they're born this way, or can they be made to be this way?
the debate is still out there. I've read everything on it, and there seems to be a big faction within psychology, and well, not so much in psychology. It's mainly in psychiatry, and it's also within sort of mainstream science that it's genetic. But when you start looking into it, it's not always genetic. It seems to be, it's almost like this psychopathic consciousness can just appear anywhere, and it can come out of the blue. The best way the best analogy I could make would be, say you had a family where there was no athletes in that family. They had no history of sport, and then suddenly one kid is born who's an incredible athlete, a swimmer, runner, soccer player, baseball player, whatever. Or the family has no history of musicians, and then one kid is born who's an incredible musician, brilliantly talented. It's just like that. It's almost like they seem to come out of nowhere. Now, that could still mean there still is a genetic, a genetic aspect to that, and maybe there is a gene sequence in there that's switched off and only comes on either through damage in the womb or maybe socio-political or domestic or environmental factors imposing upon that. But I'm still not even sure about that. I just cannot get to the roots of what the actual cause is. It probably is genetic, but I'm not going to say that until I've seen absolute definite proof.
Yeah,
because
as I mentioned to you, but just before we came on, my wife and I we'd had a number of foster kids in our home, and we'd seen some actual psychopaths with others who had some type of injury. Some of the behavior seemed almost a defense mechanism for them just to protect themselves.
Yeah, well, they could have been abused as kids, and they could have had damage to their brain, to their frontal cortex, or the limbic part of their brains. The limbic part of the brain is interesting. Where there's clusters of nerves there. There was actually they control how we process our actual emotions. They don't give us our emotions or take them away, but they define how we process them. And I do believe that you can create absolute. Well, it's not. I do believe it's an absolute fact. Mental or indeed violent conditions can create a proto-psychopath. That's a term I use for them. They're not really a psychopath, but they emulate the pathology because of some abusive background. And they could, or whatever they've been, whatever they've been actually culturally or environmentally impacted upon them, like joining a gang, like joining a street gang, might make them that way. But they could still be cured. Where a true psychopath, one who's born with the specific, neurological and neuroelectrical aspects to their brain, there's absolutely no hope. There's psychopaths from the day they're born to the day they die.
All right, stay right there. We got a quick break here. We're talking with Thomas Sheridan. His book, Puzzling People: The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. We'll come back and talk some more on the other side. Sheridan here, his book, Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. His website, labyrinthpsycho.blogspot.com. You can check out his stuff. A number of YouTube videos there, a very active YouTube channel. And I got to tell you, this last night, as I'm reading part of your book, I'm literally going through every weird relationship I've ever had in my life and trying to figure out if these people were psychopaths or not. I mean, it's almost like as soon as you come across this information, you start reviewing your entire life.
Yeah, that was the idea of writing the book. I wanted to make an easy readable book that took very complex science and clinical studies and put them in a very presentable format in almost like a friendly way, because a lot of people are very badly damaged by this experience. So it would actually give them a sense of comfort, and it would be although it's actually the book is nearly 80,000 words, but for some reason it reads very, very quickly, which is good. But the idea too as well is I wanted that book to be like a guidebook that when you finish reading it, you put it on your bookshelf, and if you go to a new job and there's somebody there that's who's a puzzling people, you go home and you pick the book up and you check the book out, and you try and evaluate fairly and emotionally neutral if that person may be a psychopath. But that's like I'm getting emails from people now saying they're buying it for their grandchildren and everything, so they'll have it when they graduate high school and things like that. And I think that was exactly what I wanted it for, a guidebook. But everybody says the same thing. Oh yeah, I was married to him. Oh, I worked with him. Oh, I voted for her. That kind of thing. And that's great, because that means that the message is getting out to them. The book is there for people to tick the boxes, and if it works for them, then help them to get out of that situation or to help them recover from it.
Well, the persona they're able to put on, as you mentioned, many of them appear very, very charismatic, and people are drawn to them. And some of the very, features of a psychopath's persona are, people are drawn to them, and it's the very things a psychopath uses to lure those people into those relationships.
Absolutely. See, what happens is when you first encounter a psychopath, this is why they're so good in politics, actually, and why they're good at sales and things like that. What they do is they first meet you, they start learning you. They can often be very quiet and they almost seem distant and aloof, but they're listening to you and they're nodding you. And what they're doing is they're looking for your triggers and the actual missing pieces within your personality that they can exploit. And what they essentially do is they find out all the things that have been missing and missing or damaged within you, and what they do is they compensate for that. They become almost like the missing jigsaw piece. And what happens really is you essentially fall in love with yourself, or you essentially vote for someone who's just like you, that yourself really. And what happens there is a persona has been invented. Psychopath actually has an actual personality. All psychopaths function with bespoke personas, which they create to manipulate an individual or an organization or even an entire, society. And that's what it is. They're tremendous students of human behavior. Because see, imagine that you were one of them, and say you're growing up, you get to be about 12, 13, 14, and you realize that you don't have this thing that everyone talks about called feelings or emotions. Well, they do have feelings, but they tend to be just negative, things like jealousy and stuff like that, and envy. But you don't feel compassion, or you don't feel sadness when you see someone who's good being hurt. And then you think to yourself, if I can learn how to fake this stuff, that gives me a tremendous advantage over the rest of the world, because without any kind of remorse or compassion, I can just go through life manipulating and deceiving and lying everybody by being exactly what they want to be. And it begins very, very young, usually at puberty, and that's how they live their lives. And bespoke personas.
But there's almost kind of a freaky kind of a freedom in that. I mean, I would think they would almost feel very empowered to say, hey, I can do this without any regrets, any problems. Hell yeah, sign me up, let's party.
Yep, they do. And the challenge of it fills them with tremendous surges of energy. But what happens is they get bored. They're always, once they've got what they want, if, some guy's a psychopath and he sees this woman and she's like really beautiful, or else normally he'll just go for a woman who has a lot of money, a widow or something. And he moves in there, he gets everything he wants, and once he has the thrill of the actual game, of the thrill of the kill, of getting what they want, they're instantly bored. They suffer from tremendous levels of boredom, and then they move on to the next thing. That's why they always seem to be, right until they're old people, they're still doing it. It's almost like that this rush of energy they get from manipulating a person, devastating them, and then moving on. This sense of, you actually meet them when they're in these states, they have this effervescence about them. They're actually giddy, they almost light up, and they're harvesting almost, well, I'm not saying they are harvesting, but it almost seems like they're harvesting the emotional devastation that they've impacted upon the person they've just destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, I know in the few encounters I've had with something will happen, something bad will happen, and they seem quite happy about things, and they almost seem completely different than this person that you knew, because in fact you didn't really know them in the first place. But yeah, I've noticed that they'll be just happy, giddy. Somebody could be bleeding next to them, and if they caused it and brought it about, they're over trying to figure out the next thing, and it's almost like a high for them.
Yeah, or if they say if they marry somebody, get the money off them, and then they decide they're moving on. Now they will actually leave the person. Chances are they probably won't even call them or contact them, and it's usually always the other person who has to sort of chase them down to find them. And when they find them, they're often astounded to come face to face with a person who looks like the person they knew, who has the same voice, but is a completely different personality altogether. It's not that person, and that in itself can be incredibly traumatic. In fact, that can be shockingly traumatic, because you could have a lot of emotional capital invested within this persona. Suddenly it's gone, and boom, you're in post-traumatic stress disorder time.
Oh, well, definitely. Is a psychopath and a psychic vampire basically the same thing?
I don't know a lot about the theory of psychic vampires, but from what I've read about it, yeah, it does seem very similar. And, you know, people who contact me and email me, they often use that term. Yeah, okay, I suppose in a non-scientific sense, it makes perfect sense to rationalize it that way. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, I first started coming into contact with psychopaths in a big way when I worked at Wall Street investment banks. And there were certain individuals who I knew were psychopathic because a friend of mine, well, not a friend of mine, but an acquaintance at the job who was a clinically diagnosed psychopath actually told me who the other psychopaths in the building were because they can recognize each other. It's almost like an honor among predators, and they don't hunt in each other's ground. But there was one particular guy, I will never forget him. When he would walk into the room, it would literally feel like, you know when you're in a room with a nice cozy fireplace and then somebody opens the door and the cold rushes right in, the heat comes right out, like the law of thermodynamics. It was an emotional, version of that.
Yeah, the mood changes, the tension goes up, the dynamic of everything changes.
And he is just filled with energy because he knows that everyone in that room is miserable because of him.
Yeah. And I've seen that too, where they're just bopping along, and everybody is all of a sudden everything has gone great, and then there's a tension that erupts in a room, and you can't figure out where it's coming from, but you know it's there, and it drives you nuts. Thomas, stay right there. We've got to take a break. We'll come back in just a minute. There's more to come here on the Monday edition of the Mike Chambers radio program. Back in just a second. Here on the Mike Chambers radio program, we're talking with Thomas Sheridan. His book, Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. And this is an interesting topic, and I almost wish we could be playing the off-air conversation as well as the on-air conversation, because it has just been just as interesting as what we've been talking about on-air. And that's just the way it always works. Is that the good during the breaks is as good or better than what's on the air? So we have to sometimes you almost have to stop and not continue on. But question out of the chat room here is: can one be a psychopath and a schizophrenic at the same time? And how does this fit into the multiple personality disorders?
Well, that's an interesting one. I never thought about that before. If someone was a schizophrenic and a psychopath at the same time, they would probably be not enough in control of their actual psychology in order to manipulate. So the schizophrenia may cancel out the psychopathology. As regarding multiple personality disorders, I think that's actually a real thing. That's a real condition. However, I think a lot of people who encounter psychopaths, particularly what we were talking about, how they change personas, automatically assume that they've met someone who's suffering from this multiple personality disorder, rather than the real truth of that they have multiple personas to manipulate people. And often psychopaths who have been caught will try and, say like they've been doing all kinds of scams at the same time, will often try and use the multiple personality disorder thing to get lenient treatment by the courts and things like that.
Yeah, just say, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. Oh no, there's something wrong with them, all right. What makes them different than people that have other mental illnesses is they know what's wrong with them, but they hide behind a mask of sanity. They do know right from wrong, and they deliberately choose wrong because it excites them. It gives them a power rush.
Yeah, let's talk about psychopaths in the media and in politics, because at a macro level, that's where the most, I think these days we're affected the most. Of the people in politics, what would you think percentage-wise are psychopaths?
Well, it's an interesting one. It's very easy at times to think, 100%, that. But, and there are days it does seem like that. But in politics, where you will find the psychopaths clustering will be less in the elected positions and more in the things like the NGOs, the Quangos, these political think tanks, these political sort of organizations and what they call foundations these days. And that's what's actually really running the world. Democracy is not actually running this planet. Democracy is an illusion. It's like someone said, if democracy worked, they wouldn't let us vote. Democracy is almost to make you feel like you have a say. And you do, in democracy is real at a local level, but once you get into a national level, and particularly on a global level, the world is run by think tanks and foundations, and these things would be absolutely, completely packed and loaded with psychopaths. You'll often see the same individuals moving from one of these groups to the other. They have tremendous power, and yet none of them have ever been elected in their lives, and they'll basically tell the politicians what to do, because essentially these ones that are in these NGOs and quangos, and they're basically contractors on behalf of they're really kind of middlemen, salesmen, on behalf of the real power base, which is like the military-industrial complex, the global financing, the oil industry, and all the other big, huge capitalist machines, the multinationals. They will employ these psychopaths in these NGOs to tell politicians what to do, and so that's where you'll find them. But they do get elected too, as well. There's no doubt about that. But often a psychopath will come to power more than likely in politics as an unelected, top-ranking public servant.
Yeah. What I would guess that whether they're in office or they're behind-the-scenes guy that's pulling the strings. I guess they're the puppeteers in many ways. Do you think they get a high out of the wars they create and seeing the death and destruction that is at hand by their decisions and their influence?
Well, Henry Kissinger made an infamous statement to Alexander Haig, and it's in Alexander Haig's biography, where he said that military men were dumb, stupid animals to be sacrificed in foreign wars, and that's about as psychopathic as you can get, to be sacrificed on behalf of foreign policy. And that was a shocking statement, and that's actually real. He did say that. It's I have no reason to believe that Alexander Haig lied about that. But do they get a rush in the power rush from it? I think they get a power rush from the actual political. To them. I mean, when Leon Trotsky, when he left the United States and came over to the Soviet Union to finance the Bolshevik Revolution, although he's portrayed by Western intellectuals and the intelligentsia as the good communist, he was actually one of the most psychopathic individuals in history. And what he'd actually would do was he was actually organize, finance, and pay death squads all over the Soviet Union. And his basic premise was, shoot everybody you can find. And what that will do is it'll put the fear and terror into everyone, so they'll be afraid to actually question the state and will play no part in trying to interfere with politics, because they know they'll be shot. So but he actually took Trotsky now, since the fall of the Soviet Union, these papers came out. It's actually been shown that Trotsky himself took part in some of these executions. So yeah, I think they do have this sadistic, bloodthirsty thing that when they do get to that level, some of them definitely are like that. Trotsky absolutely was.
Yeah, just a thrill that comes, and we see this pattern of that you get power, and what do? The first thing you start doing is eliminating those enemies. And you and I were talking about this during the break, is that this is what happens, is that they'll go in and get rid of all the other fanatics and the other groups that themselves may be loaded with psychopaths to eliminate the competition.
Yes, there's a fascinating sadomasochistic aspect to the pathology, where if you have an organization, actually the Bolsheviks in Russia is a good one, but it can happen in any organization, even ones that have the seemingly most benign agenda. But you will get, there's an interesting S&M aspect to the pathology, where they tend to worship psychopaths, that is. The psychopath tends to worship what they perceive as the authority figure or the great leader above them, while at the same time despising those that they deem below them. So they're for that kind of development of an organization, a political movement that wants to take over. They're great for despots. A great example of that would be Hitler's brown shirts. Hitler's brown shirts were the most fanatical devoters of the Third Reich and of National Socialism. As soon as they got to power, the first thing that was done was to kill them all, Yeah. And they and that was because they knew that the psychopaths at the very top know that they know exactly what they are like, and therefore they know exactly what the ones below them are like. So they have to get rid of them. And it always happens in every regime. The most fanatical ones who actually win the revolution and take over, they're always the first ones to be put up against a wall and shot. Right,
because there's an ideology that they maintain with their fanaticism, and you need the fanatic, but the psychopath doesn't want the competition, because they have to be in power and in control.
Yeah. Once they get, and also when the revolution is won, the psychopath is not going to be happy and go home.
Right.
You know, if you have a real genuine revolution, like in any country where it was when your country won independence, when my country won independence, the real hardcore, decent, you know, the real rebel, the real freedom fighter guys, when the war was over, they either went into government to try and build the country up, or they just retired and never spoke about it ever again. But a psychopath wouldn't be like that. Once the revolution was won, what the psychopath would want would be more and something else. And the obvious solution then would be to start another revolution against the guy that they brought into power.
Yeah, yeah. And well, of course, in the case of Hitler, you know, the ultimate psychopath, what it was that he said, we need breathing room, which means I need more places to conquer.
Exactly, and there's a famous video that shows Hitler and in Reichstag, and he got a letter from the British foreign attaché asking him what were the territorial ambitions of the Third Reich, and as a sarcastic joke, Hitler starts reading out the list of just about every country in Europe, from Iceland all the way across to Iraq. You know, and it was just to show he wanted everything.
Wants it all. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
All right, stay right there. We got another segment to go with Thomas Sheridan. Everybody stay right there. If you want to join us, 866-841-1065 or 512-904-8014. Fascinating subject. Back in a minute with more. Final few minutes with Thomas Sheridan. Thomas, is there anybody that you see that's out there in politics or in the media today that you can just look at them and you know without a doubt they are psychopaths?
Oh yeah, but I refrain from naming public. Well, in Ireland we have really intense libel laws, and they basically use as a form of censorship by our own elites, so you don't criticize them. So basically they can have a life of causing mayhem, and then nothing actually gets done until they're out of office, and then they give them a little obligatory tribunal investigation, and then they're sent home. But up until that, but also foreign people can come here and implement our libel laws if something is said about them here. So,
right. Yeah,
yes, absolutely I can, and I would love to name them, point them, but if you read my book, you'll know who they are just by going by what I tell you in the book. You'd be able to spot the psychopath in the factory where you work, the department store where you shop, or the guy who you're ticking is, or woman who you're ticking is the box on polling day.
Yeah, well, let me phrase it this way. Anybody in the U.S. Congress that you see as a psychopath, without naming names.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
I'm very familiar with U.S. politics. Unfortunately, you know, the United States being such an incredibly powerful country, you know, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the media, if it's not psychopathic, it's definitely megalomania among a number of them. It's seeing themselves as something bigger than they are, something with a messiah complex that we're certainly starting to see emerge.
Well, normal people don't have, you know, when you think about what politics really is, it's not, you know, normal people don't have a desire to control others. I have no desire to control you, you have no desire to control me. So, or to tell you how to think, how to regulate your life or make you do things. So there's a pathology immediately already there, there's a pathology, you know. It may not always be psychopathic, but it is a pathological drive that's unhealthy to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a movie you got to watch called Face in the Crowd. It's a 1950s movie starring Andy Griffith and Patricia Neal. It's about a guy by the name of Lonesome Rhodes, who's essentially a psychopath, and he becomes a huge star. But his psychopathy goes into megalomania, and he actually believes that people are listening and turning on absolutely everything he says, and you see his rise and his fall out of it. But it's an interesting movie.
Let me write this down. What's the name?
It was made in 1957. It's called A Face in the Crowd. It was Andy Griffith's first movie, by the way. And
Andy Griffith.
And Patricia Neal's in it.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, Walter Matthau's in it. It's a great movie. Great movie.
I have to check that out, yeah. Thank you for that. I'll definitely check that out. I am interested in movies that do, you know, have realistic portrayals of the psychopath. Yeah, this sounds like one to check out.
This is one where you see his rise and immediately, you know, at first he knows what he's doing. He's just playing the game to get along. And then as he goes along, he actually begins to believe that he himself is bigger. than what he is, and that he is a driver and a force of things. And it's an interesting little play. And in the last scene of the movie, somebody has built an applause machine for him. That as he speaks, they'll either laugh on cue or they will applaud on cue. And there's a guy pushing.
Oh, well, that's
buttons.
very psychopathic.
Yeah, there's a guy there pushing the buttons.
They all have this sense of grandiosity.
Yeah.
That there's something special. They all feel like I'm fantastic, I'm wonderful, and they'll make no bones about telling you that. With a straight face, by the way. Even if they're, a guy who's working, as a street sweeper, he'll tell you, I'm the greatest in the world. That's what they're like. They have this tremendous grandiosity about them.
Yeah, and
that can be quite comical too at times.
Well, sure, yeah, because
this oafish windbag, boasting about himself.
If only they'd listen to me. If only. Yeah,
and they all betrayed me. They all stabbed me in the back, and they're full of those stories as well. They all let me down, and they were all jealous of me. It's tremendous when you really start to see what they're like and what a psychopath really is. It just dawns on you how many have had your life messed up by. Yeah,
well, yeah, because again, until you recognize who they are, and if you don't have any knowledge, you just know that you've been hurt, you would have no way of knowing who these people are. That's the interesting thing. And to realize that they're literally 5% of the population. In America, that's we're a population of over 300 million. 5%, that's 15 million people. That's a lot of people.
Yes. Yep, and the amount of misery and havoc just one psychopath can live in their life. Yeah. It just goes to show you how many millions and millions of people are impacted by their pathology.
Yeah. I mean, in over 50 states, that translates to 300,000 a state. Not to mention around the world. Yeah. So literally, they're the size of a medium-sized city. You put them all together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. So, any additional books you're looking at doing after this one?
I have a few things in the work. I'm actually getting. I'm getting requests to write up a follow-up book to Puzzling People, dealing again with psychopaths. There'll be issues in that I haven't covered, like child psychopaths I didn't cover in Puzzling People, and also more testimonies. I'm getting a lot of testimonies from people they're really quite harrowing and shocking, and these people's stories should be told, especially also because there's a similarity between all the stories, which people should know that again these people are easy to spot and recognize, but once you have the skills to spot and recognize them. And that's the problem. We all lack that. We don't have... Our ignorance is their greatest power. And that's why I wrote Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, to help people defend themselves from that. Yeah, because
you have one story of a woman who... Her stepbrother is a psychopath. And he goes to great lengths to control her. And you think this even happens inside of families, which even makes it even worse.
Yeah, and pushing the boundaries. In that particular story, he kept pushing her boundaries to see what she tolerate the next thing. And we see that in government, where they implement like incredible and ridiculous security controls. Right. And then the public complains, or else higher taxes. They complain. But if we don't really get upset about it, then they'll push it to the next level. And that's how psychopaths are. They're constantly testing your boundaries, and then if they can push it to that level, then they go to the next one.
Right, and they'll try you once, probe you once, withdraw, come back and do it again, and if you do nothing the second time, they continue on. Just because they haven't done it again doesn't mean they're not thinking about it.
Yeah. But it's like the Roman Emperor Fabian. His idea of winning wars was never one great glorious battle in, say, the Julius Caesar style. His idea was to conquer in small, incremental, tiptoe steps. And, he expanded the Roman Empire greatly. And, a lot of people know Julius Caesar, but they don't know about Fabian, where Fabian was just a devious, meticulous conqueror. And that's very psychopathic as well.
Well, yeah, because it extracts great pain from both sides. It gives you twice the high.
Yeah, and they've got all the time in the world to work on you for. If they want something, they will hang in there for a very long time to try and get it.
Yeah.
You know, they have tremendous patience that way, especially if they're enjoying the manipulation. They're getting something out of it, like money on the way, or power, or sexual benefits. They will be in it for the long haul if it's a really good prize to them at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thomas, this hour's flown by quickly. We'll definitely want to do this again.
I'd be glad to be back.
Yeah, this has been a fun hour, and thanks so much for coming on. His website, labyrinthpsycho.blogspot.com. Also, you can find him in the recent guest section of MikeChambersLive.com. We've also got a link to his book at Amazon. You can buy it there, or you can find out more at his website there, and a number of YouTube videos. Thomas, once again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you for you and the listeners to have me.
It was our pleasure, and I look forward to doing it again soon.